Good evening, participants. Welcome to another session on applying literary theories and research. So before I hand over the mic to my colleague, Mr. Rahul, to introduce the resource person for today evening, Dr. P. Ratna, I would like to just give a few pointers, and I think I'm reiterating the fact that the chat box will be disabled. So if the resource person asks me any questions, I will enable the chat box. The feedback link will be posted at the end of the session, and we request you to keep a note of the questions that you want the resource person that you want to get an answer to. And at the end of the session, definitely there'll be a Q&A session where you can post your questions, and ma'am would be happy to answer you. And there would be a limit on the number of questions, keeping the time in mind. And if there are more questions to it, we'll definitely send it across to the resource person and get the answers to it and send it back to you. So with that, I would like Rahul to introduce the resource person for today's evening session.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, Rahul.
So good evening, everyone. Good evening. So today we have the resource person, Dr. P. Ratna, Professor, B.S. Abdul Rahman, President, Institute of Science and Technology, amidst us. She has done her PhD in post-colonial literature. She has a vast experience of 25 years in teaching. There are many research scholars pursuing their research on eco-critical studies and post-colonial studies under her able guidance and supervision. She has expressed her research interest in the areas of marginalized literature, English literature, Australian Aboriginal literature, gender studies, and comparative studies. Ma'am had submitted 3 important proposals titled Enhancing Scientific and Technical Writing Skills, Soft Skills for Employability, Communicative Competency of the Pre-Final Year Students to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. She had published around 20 research papers in various national and international journals. She had been publishing books since 2001. Her books are widely used in many engineering colleges and deemed universities in Tamil Nadu. She had presented 16 papers on various titles. She had participated in 50 seminars and conferences held at various national and international levels. She had conducted several training program sessions since 2001. She had won several awards and acknowledgements from University of Cambridge and B.S. Abdul Rahman University. Yesterday's talk on research trends in eco-criticism is a perfect prelude to today's address, as today's presentation is on applying the theory. It is indeed our immense pleasure to have a person of your scholarly repute. Dear ma'am, without any delay, I would like to hand over the session to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Rahul, for the generous words of introduction. I'm really honored, and it's my pleasure to be in this forum today, meeting all the researchers on this topic. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, Team Aura, and then the New College, for having invited me for deliberating on this topic. I would like to especially thank Dr. S. Vijay Kumar, Professor of English, BSc Crescent, for having entrusted upon me a session during this 1-week FTP on the much relevant topic on research, which is usually a gray area for all the researchers. In fact, there's application of literary theories. So it's my honor as well as my pleasure to deliberate on this topic. And with these words, let's get into the deliberation. And let me share my screen. 1 minute. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
1 minute, let me share the full screen. Yes. So today's topic is literary theories in praxis, approaches to feminism. And to begin with, let me give you an overview of my deliberation today. I will be beginning with an introduction to feminism, and we will be tracing the origin, evolution of this feminism, a brief history of it. And I will be focusing on different approaches, or I would even say the offshoots of feminism I'll be talking about. And feminist criticism, we will be focusing on its history and what are the various dispositions in that. Okay? And I will be focusing on feminist criticism in praxis by means of giving some examples, a few examples we will be looking at. And the last part of my deliberation will be about generally the conceptions about literary theory, what are the myths and realities, and how to approach theory, what are the best strategies involved in it in general. So this is how we will be going through this. To begin with, I would like all the participants to have a minute's reflection on these three words: female, feminine, feminist. Just think about these words, and it is very crucial to understand the distinction between these three terms for understanding this today's concept, that is feminism. Female, feminine, and feminist. You try to distinguish the meaning, and of course, we will see the meaning now. Female is something related to biology. It's a matter of biology. And feminine is a set of socially and culturally constructed characteristics for a female. That is feminine. And feminist is a political position. The difference between the first two terms, female and feminine, in this difference lies the force of feminism. Hope you will understand. And we will now go into the terminology of feminism. What is it exactly? What does it mean? So it is actually the belief in social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. Although largely originating in the West, feminism is manifested worldwide and is represented by various institutions committed to activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. So here I have given the definition given by Britannica, although lots of other definitions are also available for this term, feminism. So since I felt this is comprehensive and all inclusive of all the kind of discrimination or inequality in different sectors, so I have included this definition by given in Britannica. Feminism, it's not just a political movement, it is also an intellectual commitment, and that is why we literature people are interested in researching this topic. So it's an intellectual movement also, which seeks justice for women and the end of sexism in all forms, explicit forms or implicit forms, in all the sectors. So motivated by the quest for social justice, feminist inquiry provides a wide range of perspectives on social, cultural, economic, and political phenomena. I want every one of you to underscore these four factors: social, cultural, economic, and political. In what way it is related to the study of females? We will see it in the course of this deliberation. So first, with this definition in the backdrop, we will just start to trace the growth and the evolution of this political movement. Generally, it will be easy for us to understand the history by means of these three waves of feminism, or in fact, even the fourth wave has come now. So it will be better for us to understand the evolution of this feminism in this three wave pattern. So if we take up first wave feminism, it started in the late 1700s to early 1900s. It all started in England with writers like Mary Wollstonecraft, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. In the year 1792, she wrote insisting on the equal rights or the right to vote for women, highlighting all the inequalities between the sexes. So it started with, usually, even though we have a few instances of speaking for equality, speaking for the rights of women, which appeared earlier than this. And after that, activists contributed to the women's suffrage movement. And as a result of all these things, in the year 1920, at last, they were able to get this national universal suffrage with the passing of the 19th Amendment. So you can see the number of years between Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women and then how it realized in practice in the year 1920. Nearly more than a century has gone in order to get this suffrage. And if we take up the second wave feminism, starting from early 1960s to late 1970s, and you could understand that there was a period of lull during this two world wars. And 1960s it started, and this time they fought for more equal working conditions necessary in America during the World War II, and movements such as National Organization of Women formed in 1966 cohere feminist political activism. So what happened after the World War II, the employment scenario changed, and then more number of women got into the employment sector, and there were, as usual, unequal conditions existing for men and women. So based on these unequal conditions, women started fighting for their equal working conditions. And for this, writers like Simone de Beauvoir, French intellectual and feminist. So her monumental work, actually, The Second Sex, in English translation, it is The Second Sex in 1949, and Elaine Showalter, these people established the groundwork for the dissemination of feminist theories. So these feminist theories and then the political movement, they just cohered and they dovetailed with the American civil rights movement. So it started with the suffrage and then went on to fight for equal rights in the working environment. So what happened in this first and second wave feminism mostly involved with the educated middle class white women. It didn't include the other women of other countries across the world. So it was specifically focusing on the issues and challenges faced by middle class white women in England and America, in general Europe. This third wave feminism, which started in the early 1900s to 2000s, I won't say present, but 2000s. So it happened because of the concerns, which are not concerns of Black women, African women, and women across the developing countries. Those women's challenges were not at all put forward anywhere in any forum. So this third wave feminism focused on the challenges faced by these African women or women of color in general. So it resisted the perceived essentialist. Essentialist means actually the concept of essentialism, which strongly believes that women have their unique characteristic traits, the essence. So this third wave feminism was actually an anti-essentialist movement, It fought against this overgeneralized and oversimplified ideologies and a wide heterosexual middle class focus of second wave feminism. Since the second wave feminism did not cover the issues and challenges of the women of color, the women of colors their problems were totally different and all the more complicated, and they had to confront on a daily basis an interplay between sexism and racism, and it was totally something unheard of by the middle class educated white women. So the black women has to confront the interplay between sexism and racism. That is, they have to make their black men understand the issues of gender, and they have to make the white men and white women understand the issues of race. So their challenges were more when compared to the challenges of the Western countries, Western women. So this third wave feminism, it borrows from post-structural and contemporary gender and race theories to expand on marginalized populations' experiences. And there comes writers like Alice Walker, who wanted the world to hear the concerns of the Black community, and they fought for more wholeness, more comprehensive protest against inequality across the world. So this third wave feminism, before going into the fourth wave feminism, this third wave feminism resulted as a result of the inadequacies of the focus of second wave feminism. For example, in the international forums, in the international conferences organized for women equality and feminist problems and all these things, the developed countries, they focused on certain issues like contraception, abortion, and that is women-related issues, for which the women from developing countries raised protest over it, saying that their major problem was underdevelopment. When their children were starving and they dying out of thirst and hunger, their priority will be development rather than women's issues. So there was lots of discrepancies between the second wave feminism and the feminism issues raised by the Westerners when compared to the third world countries. And in fact, the third world countries, women faced challenges which are totally different or totally new and unheard of for the white women. For example, early marriages, child marriages, forced marriages, and burning of widows, and female genital cutting, and all these happenings in the developing countries, in the African, Asian, and Latin American countries, it was totally new for them. So they were all taken aback at the plight of women. So that's resulted in the third wave of feminism. And now coming to 2000s, although debated by some, please understand, when you read, you would have read only 3 waves of feminism. But now, even though people debate about this, fourth wave of feminism has come up, which begins in the year 2012 with a focus on sexual harassment, body shaming, rape culture, and the key component of this wave is the use of social media to highlight and address these concerns. Even we would have heard about this Me Too movement, how it was taken across the globe, worldwide, shocking so many people about the injustice, about the sexual violence, the stories told by people, shared by the affected women through social media. So victims of sexual harassment or assault around the world and of all ethnicities, they began sharing their experiences on social media using the hashtag #MeToo, and everyone of us know about it. So this is popularly identified as the beginning of fourth wave of feminism. So we are taking up the issues of women to the social media, to a larger gathering across the globe. So having now briefly seen the four waves of feminism and having understood the history and the development of this feminist movement, we will now focus on certain offshoots of feminism. And I would like to give a caveat here that it is not exhaustive. The terms I'm going to focus are not exhaustive, and I'm going to focus only on the umbrella terms. And of course, I will give you the logic after this. And to begin with, liberal feminism, it's focused its energy on concrete and pragmatic change at an institutional and governmental level. So, this liberal feminism, you can cohere this with the second wave of feminism. Like they just wanted some pragmatic change in the initial level. Actually, what they wanted is that is equality in the workplace at an institutional and the governmental level. They wanted some equal place in the employment sector, some practical change they expected. So its goal was to integrate women more thoroughly into the power structure and to give women equal access to positions men had traditionally dominated. So liberal feminism, as the very word tells, so they just expected some pragmatic change, especially in the institutional and governmental level. Equality, they asked for, they demanded for. So now we'll go to the next type, radical feminism, as the very word tells, radical, aim to reshape society and restructure its institutions, which they saw as inherently patriarchal. So you can just compare liberal feminism and radical feminism. Liberalists, they just ask for some pragmatic change, but these people, radicalists, they wanted a radical shift or a radical revamping of the society itself, because they strongly felt that women's subservient role in society was too closely woven into the social fabric. It is inherent. It is inextricably joined with the social fabric, that only a revolutionary revamping of society only can help make a change in the society. So this was the main concept of radical feminism. We'll go to cultural or difference feminism, the last of the three currents. In fact, I want you to understand that the second wave of feminism, unlike the first wave, gave rise to lots of theoretical discussions, extensive theoretical discussions on the role of family and the issues of gender and all the plight of women in all the sectors, political, economic, social, in all the phenomena. So it actually gave rise to lots of theoretical discussions. So as a result of this, we had these phenomena like radical, liberal, and the last one is cultural or difference feminism. So according to these people, men and women are intrinsically the same. Actually, they rejected this notion. They were against this notion that men and women are intrinsically the same. So they strongly felt that women are women and men are women with distinct characteristic traits. And there is no meaning for women to get into the traditional spheres, male spheres. So actually, they were critic of mainstream feminism, that is the radical feminist or the liberal feminist. And since they felt that actually they are essentialist, they believe in essentialism. They strongly felt that women have unique features and they have their own traits. That is, they have the greater concern for affective relationships. They have the ability to nurture, okay, more than men. So there is no meaning in just encroaching into traditional male spheres, according to this cultural feminist. So going into the male sphere, according to them, is denigrating women's natural inclinations. So they felt that women have certain essentialistic features. So these are all the major currents of this second wave of feminism. And I want you to relate these three terms with second wave of feminism. And the next term, what we are going to see, is essentially related to the third wave. So here comes the intersectional feminism. This intersectional feminism actually talks about not just sexism, but all other factors such as racism, class, and of course, in the Indian setup, our caste, everything comes here. So, Kimberly Crenshaw, in the year 1989, she described how different social categories interact. Different social categories here refers to race, caste, class, and even ability. Ability also is nowadays included in this intersectionalism. Okay, disability or ability, right? Ableism. So she has described how different social categories interact, sometimes resulting in compounding effects and tensions. So she has argued that discrimination against Black women is different from general anti-woman discrimination or anti-Black racism. So as I have already told, the second wave, the first and second wave feminism are inadequate in meeting the challenges of the Black women or women of color. So there comes the necessity for this intersectionality. So it involves a unique compound experience of both sexism and racism. So people started understanding that being a Black and a male is different from being a Black and a female. So initially used in the context of discrimination law, the concept resurgence in the 21st century among left-wing activities, which broadened intersectionality to include categories such as class and sexual orientation. So first it started with racism, and then class was also included. And in today's context, we could also include, as I told you earlier, caste as well as ability factors also under this umbrella term, intersectionality. So in the beginning of my deliberation, I told you that political, social, economic phenomena are also involved in the study of women. So here comes the reason or the logic. So all these factors also affect the inequality of women. So that is why we need to have this intersectional feminism. So intersectional feminism, as I told you, comes under which comes our Dalit feminism also. And also, I want you to understand under this intersectional feminism comes all other offshoots of feminism like Marxist feminism, socialist feminism, and even ecofeminism. That is the inequality or the exploitation of women and nature by the patriarchal society. So all these come under. So that is why I didn't include all the other terms, all other offshoots, and I have focused only on the major umbrella terms. So having seen some umbrella terms or offshoots of feminism, now we will get into feminist criticism. So we have seen feminism as a political or a social movement, and now its relationship with literature, we will see it. So there comes the relevance of feminist criticism. So this feminist criticism is a direct product of the women's movement. And I will request the organizers to remove the 1 minute. Okay.
Ma'am?
Yes, yes. I hope my screen is visible in full.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Aruna. So feminist criticism is a direct product of the women's movement of the 1960s. So 1960s, second wave movement, hope you remember. So, so how literature is concerned here, how literature is relevant here, let's see. See, this women's movement is more concerned with books and literature because through books and literature only, people got ideas about the characteristics of female or feminine characteristics. Books and literature and other modes of cultural productions only showed to men and women what is meant by feminine, how what are the feminine qualities, what are the feminine aspirations and goals, they only actually exposed to men and women. So there comes the relevance of books and literature. In other words, I told the social or the cultural construct, feminine as a social or the cultural construct, which was established mainly through books and literature. So that is, there comes the relevance of feminist criticism. So the representation of women in literature was felt to be an important form of socialization, because literature only tells people what is it to be a feminine, what are its characteristics and all those things, the stereotypes, what we usually tell. All right. So it is concerned with the ways in which literature, other cultural productions, not just literature, other cultural productions also, other art forms also, even movies we can include here, how they reinforce or undermine the economic, political, social, and psychological oppression of women. So feminist criticism bothers about all these things. So this school of theory looks at how aspects of our culture are inherently
Ma'am, Ratna ma'am, I think you're on mute. Yes.
unmuted now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And aims to expose misogyny in writing about women, which can take explicit and implicit form. So this is the main objective of this feminist criticism. And again, we will see a quick history of, or the evolution of this feminist criticism from 1960s. From 1960s, please associate this with second wave feminism, all right? Aruna, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
in 1970s, so we can see the progress or development in the feminist literary criticism. First, it started with exposing the against the patriarchal rules and the norms. And the 1970s, there was more progress towards exposing the mechanisms of patriarchy. That is, critical attention was given to books by male writers in which influential or typical images of women were constructed. So as we had already seen, literature is one of the major influences in constructing this feminine social construct. So especially books by male writers. So this critical attention was given to books by male writers. And the criticism was combative and polemical. As we had seen, like extensive theoretical discussions happened, and mostly it was combative, argumentative, and full of disputations. And it was polemical. It gave rise to lots of arguments, otherwise in simple terms. So 1980s, what happened? The mood changed. So the focus was only on the books written by male writers, and now it became much more eclectic. Eclectic meaning that it draws upon findings and approaches of other kinds of criticism, moving away from focusing only on male writers about women. It went on to focus on other criteria or phenomenon which was found in Marxism, structuralism, linguistics, and so on. Because you cannot study the plight of women in isolation, but only with social, cultural, and political phenomena. Secondly, they started attacking the male versions, exploring the nature of female world. So the female writings, the female writers, which had been hitherto not given visibility, not given importance, not read. So all these books were given a revisiting, a rereading, and a resurrection, and they reconstructed the lost or suppressed record of female experience. And thirdly, they focused on the need to construct a new canon of women's writing. So there was a shift from andro text to gyno text. So more and more women started writing. So here, constructing a new canon of women's writing. So they started actually changing the history. The history was so far full of male writing, and now they started rewriting the history, including women writers and then the books on women. So constructing a new canon of women's writing was done in this 1980s. So now we have seen the history of feminist criticism from 1960s to 80s. Now we will focus on more important concepts here actually, and on which there are lots of polarities, lots of arguments, and lots of disputations. So feminist criticism, if you take up, it is remarkable for wide range of positions existing within it. But most of the debates and discussions centered on three particular areas. They are the role of theory, the nature of language, and impact of psychoanalysis. So we will see it in detail one by one. So role of theory. See, much of the discussions, much of the differences of opinion or disagreement or on this particular concept, particular idea, role of theory, that is over the extent and the type of theory to be used in feminist criticism. So on this topic only, there are lots of disagreements, and based on various critics from various places, we can chiefly focus on three distinct terms, three distinct divisions, that is Anglo-American, British, and French, which are distinctly different from each other in their perception towards the amount and the type of theory to be used, and we will see this. So Anglo-American, so it all started in 1970s. These Anglo-American, you will be surprised by the term Anglo-American, and then comes British, because this Anglo-American group is not all are English, not all are American. So it's a mixed, and majorly it is American. So they maintain a major interest in the traditional critical concepts like theme, motive, and characterization. So they focused on the text majorly. And they believed that close reading and explication of literary text is the major thing to be focused in the business of feminist criticism. So according to them, literary text was more important, and close reading of the text focusing on the theme, motive, and characterization are important to study feminism. And major theorists or major critics who believed in this concept are Elaine Showalter, Sandra Gilbert, and Susan Gruber, majorly American. All right. So now coming to British theorists, British critics, they tend to be socialist feminists aligned with cultural materialism or Marxism. So you can see the vast difference between Anglo-Americans and the British use of theory in their criticism. So they wanted to use socialist feminist because they focused on the other phenomena like class and like history. Cultural materialism is to do with the history. It's also an eclectic one, drawing from the theories of Marxism and feminism. So this British critics, they believe that an eclectic approach will be better in studying feminism. So this is remaining active and influential even till now. That is what I told you, intersectional feminism. So this is one of the theories which are currently active as well as influential in the business of feminist criticism. So now taking up the French is contrast to American, somewhat closely related to British, because the French is overtly theoretical. They focus more on theories and in their focus on theories more than the literary text, they totally are in opposition to Anglo-Americans. So these people, they took major insights from post-structuralist, especially Lacan, Foucault, and Derrida. See, according to them, literary text is not at all a primary concern. They focused more on language and psychology in detail before coming to the text. So literary text will be the last option for them and the last step for them to study the feminist criticism, right? So, for example, for these French critics, French theorists are Julia Kristeva and Helen Sixo. Of course, we are going to focus on this language part of it and psychology part of it in some more detail in the next slides. So, hope you understand up to this. I want you to just absorb the differences or the distinction between the Anglo-American, British, and the French on the concept of using the amount and the type of theory, how they are different from each other. Just I want you to grasp. All right. And then we are going to see about language and feminist criticism, about psychology and feminist criticism. So feminist criticism and language. So this is also a fundamental issue where we have differences of opinion as usual. People widely differed and opinions are polarized. What is that? The question is whether there exists a form of language which is inherently feminine. So is there any language? When women started writing, so they had to fight with lots of ghosts. You should have definitely studied about Virginia Woolf's on the professions for women, or in her own polemical essay, Room of One's Home, she would have talked about the challenges as a woman writer and the struggle she has faced in fighting with the angel in the house concept. So when women started writing, they ended up with this major issue or the struggle. What language they have to follow? Is there any language which is inherently feminine? Or is there any language which is common and which is neutral to both men and women? So this was the main issue. And Virginia Woolf, so in her polemical essay, Room of One's Own, written in the year 1929, so she exemplifies the man's sentence. So she gives an example for a man's sentence. Of course, she doesn't explain the qualities, but we understand from the sentence that man's sentence is more rigid, following an order and pattern and everything. So from the way she has argued, we understand that women's language or women's sentences will be the otherwise, which are loosely constructed, which are at random, which are not fixed. So that's what we come to understand. And another critic called Dale Spender, in her Man-Made Language, she is just establishes that language is not a neutral medium. So she also establishes there is no such thing as a language which is common for both men and women. Women cannot use the language used by, which have been conversantly used by, which have been familiarly used by men. So language is not a neutral medium, but instrument through which patriarchy finds expression. So they wanted to have a language for their own writing, which is inherently feminine. So French theorists therefore have posited the existence of écriture féminine, a concept called écriture féminine, nothing but women's writing of women. So associated with the feminine, this écriture féminine, it facilitates the free play of meanings within the framework of loosened grammatical structures. So you can understand the difference between man's sentence and the sentence which is desired by the women writers. That is free play of meanings within the framework of loosened grammatical structures. So écriture féminine, they establish, and in fact, Écriture feminine, Julia Kristeva, actually, she is the one to have introduced this term, and she actually demonstrates this women's writing or écriture feminine in her work, The System and the Speaking Subject, by means of using these loosened grammatical structures. And she establishes that by nature it is transgressive, which is above and beyond the rules. Transgressive, rule transcending, and intoxicated. Intoxicated, I want you to understand, like highly imaginative, again, not conforming to the rules. So further expression of the notion of écriture feminine is found in the writing of Julia Kristeva. As I told you, she actually demonstrates this kind of language in her own writing. And again, Julia Kristeva, she uses the terms symbolic and semiotic to designate two different aspects of language. And again, I want you to understand these are two different aspects of language, not two different kinds of language. So she comes out with the differences between the symbolic language and semiotic language. The symbolic language to do with the writings of men or the language of men, and semiotic language represents the writing of women. And we will now see the differences between the symbolic and semiotic language as posited by Julia Kristeva. So she comes out with this. Symbolic is actually which focuses on grammar, syntax, logic. From all these terms, you can understand that it follows a strict pattern and then structure associated with authority, father, order, representation, and control. So there is a structure, there is a rule, there is a distinction, strict distinction, meaning that there is control, and you cannot go beyond that control. So you can extend this meaning to the control of women also. So under this patriarchal order, how the women are controlled. So that also in an extended meaning you can understand. So if you see the characteristics of symbolic language, it is associated with patriarchal and phallocentric language, which is essentially male-centric. So self is fixed and unified, strict distinctions and laid down structure, meaning that you cannot go beyond that. And you can also compare this with the conscious and the unconscious put forward by the psychoanalyst, especially Lacan. So Julia Kristeva is closely following the psychoanalytical theory put forward by Lacan, Jacques Lacan. So if you understand or the extended meaning of the symbolic and semiotic language, you can understand the differences between the language used by men and the language desired by women. Okay, so the symbolic language is oriented more towards structuralism. And if you take up the semiotic, if you read it one by one, you will understand that how it is that is polarized towards this symbolic. So semiotic, it is oriented or it focuses more on non-linguistic aspects of language like rhythm, sound, etc. for its understanding. So when it gives importance, symbolic gives importance to grammar, syntax, and logic, that is a pattern rule. Semiotic gives importance to non-linguistic aspects, rhythm, sound, etc. So it is not, the semiotic is not characterized by logic or order. So as we have seen in the previous slide, the écriture feminine loosened the grammatical structures, or even what Virginia will talk about. Okay, so not characterized by logic or order, and we have much looser and much more randomized way of making connections. So random connections, floating signifiers and approximations, meaning that floating signifiers, approximations, meaning that the words or the signifiers, they don't denote one particular thing, otherwise called empty signifiers, that the reader can assume, the reader can interpret, the reader can understand according to his experience. Okay, so this is not fixed. So if you see the symbolic, it is fixed and unified. Here it is random, floating. Floating meaning that it gives meanings different things to different people according to their understanding. So you cannot bring it under a boundary. So that is the meaning of random connections, floating signifiers. It is not concrete. Okay, semiotic is not concrete. It is not specific. All right. So you can have lots of extra meanings, okay, beyond the signifiers. So that is why floating signifiers or empty signifiers they are called. So it is to do with unconscious, meaning that it is highly imaginary. So you can also compare here the symbolism and the imaginary. Okay, imaginary here stands for semiotic. So in the distinction between symbolic and semiotic, you can also bring here the concepts of psychoanalysis. All right, the theories put forward by Freud, the theories put forward by Lacan. So this conscious and unconscious is essentially from psychoanalysis. So these people are oriented towards post-structuralism. That is, post-structuralism is, according to the post-structuralist, language is not a transparent medium. All right. So you need to understand, you need to interpret the text in terms of the words in contrast to each other, compared and contrast to each other, or in connection with each other. So you have to derive the meaning inside the text. Derive the meaning inside the text. So that is why it is post-structuralism. All right. So the language or the écriture feminine of women is essentially different from the language which is used by men. So these critics, they developed a language. They wanted this kind of language for their writing, for the écriture feminine. So even though this language, which is specially meant for women's writing, so this concept is considered as vital by many of the theorists. Others who felt, actually they felt that some of the people, some of the scholars, they feel that again, by means of choosing semiotic language, the women writers hand over the rational thing or the rational domain to the male, and the trans-rational thing is associated with female. You understand? So they are not for this kind of distinction put forward by these écriture feminists, feminists who created this écriture feminine, right? So again, we can understand by means of this distinction that the rational world is handed over to men and the trans-rational world is handed over to women by means of this distinction. So which was not favored by some of the scholars and some of the feminists. And from the beginning, we have been looking at that, whether it is a theory concept or language concept or any other phenomena, there are lots of polarization, lots of arguments and disputations. So that I want you to understand. And in this connection, we will see how to approach theory also in the last part of this deliberation. So now we have seen feminist criticism and language, and coming to the third important aspect on which opinions differ is feminist criticism and psychoanalysis. So even though the relationship is simple in outline, it is complex in nuance according to Peter Barry. So I'm borrowing this from, and most of the ideas are borrowed from Peter Barry. So he actually says that even though it looks simple, but it's very complex in its subtle meaning. We will see the evolution of ideas on this psychoanalysis and feminist criticism. So in the beginning, actually, Freud was considered as a prime source of patriarchal attitudes against which feminists must fight. So people, even today, people believe that, some scholars, some critics, they believe that Freud is a prime source of patriarchal attitudes. So that we have to fight. So in Kate Millett, actually in her Sexual Politics, she condemns Freud. But after some time, like there are other schools of feminists who actually defends Freud, saying that Freud actually highlighted or established that feminine is actually the gender. Actually, it is not something natural, which is constructed, which is socially constructed. So that is what these feminists also establish. Actually, the distinction between sex and gender is, it is like, as we had seen in the first slide, it is between matter of biology versus social or cultural construct. So Juliet Mitchell, she actually defends Freud by reinterpreting that Freud also has established this difference. So Freud presents that feminine is formed by earlier experience and adjustments, and it is not something natural. So Mitchell establishes this and defends Freud. So these feminists are also opinion that one is not born a woman, rather one becomes the woman. So many feminists, they have established that. So actually, by birth, a woman does not have all the qualities naturally, okay, what is constructed by society or culture in the later part. So the society or the culture only constructs a woman as who is a woman, how she should be, how she has to live, what should be her goals and aspirations, likewise. So these people puts the blame on the society and the culture. So that is how they expect a social or a cultural change in order to change the plight of women. So you can see the lots of differences of opinion among the feminists about various theorists, about Freud, about Lacan. One is favoring, one is disfavoring, one is arguing against. So you can understand that here I would like to quote again Peter Barry. Theorists are dauntingly plentiful as novelists. So many theorists coming forward with so many theoretical conceptions, either arguing or counter-arguing, proving or disproving. So we need to understand the differences of opinion and the developments of opinion on a particular topic, whether it is psychoanalysis or the language or the amount of theory with regard to feminist criticism. So here, coming back to psychoanalysis and Freud, so even though Freud was condemned by Kate Millett, the feminists who came later, actually they defended Freud because he also reflected the same opinion that women are not born, but women are made. It's not being a woman, it is becoming a woman. All right. So since it is made by the social or the cultural construct, we can say that with a change in the society and the culture, the gender roles are malleable and changeable. So it's not fixed, it's not constant. So it is malleable and changeable with the changes in the society and the culture perceptions. So Mitchell says gender roles are malleable and changeable and not inevitable and unchangeable. So that is what people are working for. So now we have seen feminist criticism and some of the major issues on which we have differences of opinion. That is three major issues. That is the role of theory, language, and psychoanalysis. So we have seen in this the interplay of so many other factors. It is not just women's issues. It is not just patriarchy. It is not just sexism alone. It is the language. It is the society. It is psychoanalysis. So everything plays in the study of feminist criticism. All right. So now, coming to this uh, psychoanalysis development, Jacqueline Rose. So we have seen Mitchell, how she defended Freud, and Jacqueline Rose, in her book, The Haunting of Sylvia Plath, she has actually applied a feminist psychoanalytic approach. So I want you to make note of this, because as we are dealing with the application of literary theory, this will be a good sample how feminist psychoanalytic approach was used by Jacqueline Rose, combining the insights of feminism, psychoanalysis, and politics. So in the 1980s, again, there was a rehabilitation of psychoanalysis, and this time there's a switch from Freud to Lacan. So Freud and Lacan more or less similar, except for the fact that what is implicit in Freud is explicit in Lacan. So Jacqueline Rose's book, actually, it created a refreshing study on the psychoanalysis. And based on these arguments, based on these critical works, we can understand that sexual identity is a cultural construct. So this is what again and again proven, like how the sexual identity is a cultural construct. And the literature actually helps to understand the insider accounts, how this construction takes place. So through women's writings, we understand the insider accounts of how this construction, how this cultural construction taking place in becoming the woman, and shows examples of this conditioning being resisted, and how this literature feminine, how this women's writing actually resist this conditioning. So literature helps us to understand the interplay of psychoanalysis, the construction of feminine, and also the resistance towards it. All right. Now, so we will come to the, having gone into some of the major issues, now we will let us go through this part, the most important part, like how to apply this theory, what are the strategies. So what do these feminist critics do? What exactly is their primary concern? So we will do it. And what they do, I have again taken from Peter Barry. They rethink the canon, aiming at the rediscovery of texts written by women writers. So we had already seen how the women writers or the feminists actually rewrote the history by means of discovering the hitherto silenced voices or the literature. So this is the feminist critics, what they do is they rethink the canon. Okay, they rediscover the text written by women writers. They revalue women's experiences. What is revalue again? So it was valued differently previously. Now with this feminist theory and all, it was revalued. So it has to be revalued. So they revalue women's experience. They examine the representations of women in literature by men and women. They challenge the representation of women as other, as lack, as part of nature. So they challenge all these conventional notions. If man is considered as a self, woman is considered as the other, or here she lacks certain abilities or certain skills or the traits which are found in men. So these are all the representations of women hitherto. So they challenge these representations. Examine the power relations, seeing reading as a political act and showing the extent of patriarchy. Recognize the role of language in making what is social and constructed seem transparent and natural. So seeming transparent and natural is essentially women. Socially constructed is reflecting the patriarchy. So we have seen the role of language and also Psychoanalysis, reread psychoanalysis to further explore the issue of male and female identity. So these are some of the things. So again, I haven't given the complete list. I have just given the most pertinent themes, what the feminist critics do. So now, to do all these things as a researcher, as you read the text, ask these typical questions. So when you take up a text for feminist study, you ask these questions. So this will help you to begin your study, to get into the study. So how is the relationship between men and women portrayed in that particular text? What are the power relationships between men and women, or characters assuming male or female roles? So who is more powerful, who is dominant, and who is playing the secondary role or the inferior role? What are the power relationships? How are male and female roles defined? Do character take on traits from opposite genders? How so? How does this change others' reaction to them? So please go through the fourth question. Okay, this has connection with some of the things we are going to see after some time. So do characters take on traits from opposite genders? How so? How does this change others' reactions to them? What does the work reveal about the operations, economically, politically, socially, or psychologically of patriarchy? What does the history of the work's reception by the public and by the critics tell us about the operation of patriarchy? Okay, how the book was received by the public, how it was received by the critics. So we have seen so far how the critics differ in their opinion with regard to language, with regard to theory, with regard to psychoanalysis and all those things. So how was the critics' idea about the particular text? Otherwise, the literature review, what you do. So what role does the work play in terms of women's literary history and literary tradition? The historical background also has to be paid importance. So with these questions, okay, so now we're coming to this praxis part of it. In practice, all right. So feminist criticism in praxis, we are going to see. So I have given actually 3 examples, one from Shakespeare, one from Milton, and another one, a short story by Catherine Mansfield. And my logic behind the selection of these authors and these texts are simple, that I want it to be familiar to all the participants. So definitely all of us would have read or at least known the gist of these texts. So based on that, I have taken. So let's see some of the approaches towards these texts. So this will give you an idea how to proceed with your application. So feminist and gender, let's take Shakespeare. So feminist and gender study approaches to Shakespeare criticism made significant gains after 1980. So you can understand the 1980s afterwards, one that is the second wave feminism only. So these things, second and third, okay. So these things gain significance. Feminists like new historicists were interested in contextualizing Shakespeare's writings rather than subjecting them to a historical formalist analysis. So again, historicists, new historicists, they focused on the background history, literature and history with the cultural aspects, all right? Like suppose a work is read through new historicism means, so it focused the literary text with the historical background. So rather than subjecting them to a historical formalist analysis that is focusing only on the text without leaving the history, feminists like new historicists, they were actually interested in contextualizing, okay, putting Shakespeare's writings in history against the backdrop of history. So turning to anthropologists such as Claude Lévi-Strauss, feminist critics illuminated the extent to which Shakespeare inhabited a patriarchal world dominated by men and fathers in which women were essentially the means of exchange in power relationships among those women, among those men. Okay, you would have studied many of Shakespeare's plays, many of Shakespeare's women characters. Some will be more prominent, some will be playing a key role, and mostly, majorly, women will be playing a subordinate role, listening to their or dominated by their men and fathers. So many critics, many feminists have approached Shakespeare's women, and we will see one of the most prominent women character created by Shakespeare, that is Lady Macbeth. So in Macbeth, definitely you would have heard about or studied about Lady Macbeth, a very strong and powerful character created by Shakespeare. Actually, she was the one who motivates Macbeth to get into the murder of Duncan, King Duncan. So she was so powerful and authoritative and dominating in the beginning, but over the course of the play, in the end, during the later stages of the play, such a powerful character is diminished into a very weak character who ends up sleepwalking, who ends up in sleepwalking, and lots of mental agony she faces, and she was not able to come out of her guilt of murder, frequently washing hands and all those things. So, and at last in her death. So, Shakespeare's portrayal of Lady Macbeth has been studied and reread by many feminist critics. So it's not just one or two. There are many rereadings of Shakespeare's women, and each having their own perspective. So commonly, I'm just talking about different perspectives. Okay? And some critics or some researchers are of the view that such a powerful character in the beginning was reduced to a weak character because of the patriarchal mindset which was prevalent during that time. So Shakespeare also, so during the time of Shakespeare, feminism was not heard of. It was unheard of. So according to the prevalent mindset of his time, actually when you contextualize Shakespeare, so the patriarchal mindset he has portrayed Lady Macbeth. This is what some people come out with. So I have given some samples. Let's quickly glance over it. See, I do fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. So actually, this is told by Lady Macbeth to Macbeth, and she, according to her, Macbeth is full of milk of human kindness. So he cannot do that, such a cruel act of murdering Duncan. So she is the one actually wants him to forget the milk of human kindness. So her character was portrayed, which is not feminine, actually. She even says at one point of time that unsex me. If I am a female, I cannot do this work. So in one of her soliloquy, she says that unsex me. And the kind of language she used, see here, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the top full of direst cruelty. So if I were a woman, I would not have this direst cruelty. So unsex me. So she wants to become a man or a male, or to have the masculine traits so that she can be with cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage of remorse. So even she doesn't want to have the feminine characters in order to achieve that power. So come to my woman's breast and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers. So even the milk, her breast milk, she wanted it to be substituted with poison, gall. So in order to get the work done. So now I want you to remember the fourth question which I asked you to have in mind, like gender roles, whether there is any reversal. So you can see the reversal of gender roles in the beginning. Okay, Lady Macbeth wants to have a masculinity, and Actually, Macbeth did not have, even though he was brave, he was meant for his bravery, he was full of human kindness. But what happens in the end, there is a reversal of roles. And once Macbeth gets into the killing, there is no stop for him. He goes on murdering people. And then even when he hears the news that Lady Macbeth was dead, he doesn't regret for that. He just shrugs his shoulder. So that was a reversal of role, okay, happening in Lady Macbeth, or reversal of role happening in both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. So I want you to think about all these things and also the kind of language. So you can here apply the psychoanalytic approach, or you can also study the language used by the Écriture Feminine, or the language used for Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. So it can be approached in different manner. And also it can be eclectic, like a new historicism approach can be done here against the backdrop of the history, the cultural moment, right? So Janet Adelman, I have given one example. Janet Adelman takes a deeper look at Lady Macbeth's rejection of her femininity in her paper, Born of Woman, Fantasies of Maternal Power in Macbeth. So she here lists out how Lady Macbeth rejects her femininity. And there is also a comparison with Lady Macbeth and Lady Macduff. Lady Macduff actually, she was just the contrast, actually antithesis to Lady Macbeth, and she was presented, she was portrayed by Shakespeare like that. But when she dies, Macduff was actually paralyzed. Actually, it was as if he was paralyzed and he wants to take revenge on Macbeth for that cruel act. So, Lady Macbeth and Lady Macduff were contrasted for their masculine and feminine traits. All right. So, next we will move on to, yes, whatever we have discussed, I have given. So you can also apply here materialist feminism theory. So new historicism. So how various theories can be applied in reading a text. So I have given you samples. So according to materialist feminism theory, despite her earlier show of strength, Lady Macbeth's eventual weakness is a result of a patriarchal portrayal of a gender. Okay. So moving on to next, Milton. So Milton's Paradise Lost book 9, I'll be focusing now. So Milton, there has been lots of differences of opinion about his approach towards Eve, approach towards women. Okay, in Paradise Lost, especially in his portrayal of Eve, whether he was an anti-feminist or sexist or feminist. So in book 9, how he presents or portrays Eve, right? Actually, in book 9 only that fatal fall or the historic fall of human race happens, and Eve does the act of disobedience. She eats the apple, which is forbidden. And before, so book 9 focuses majorly on this, and there is a conversation between Adam and Eve. Actually, Eve wants to share the labor, okay, given by God, assigned to them to taking care of the garden. So she comes out with a proposition that they could divide the labor so that they could do it fast. So this can be this conversation or the discussion between, or even this negotiation between Adam and Eve. Actually, it is perceived by different critics in different manners. Okay, so many people actually, they have established Milton's works as staunchly anti-feminist and consistently masculinist. Even patriarchal poetry, it is actually defined as. Okay, so Milton's that is Paradise Lost is actually defined as patriarchal poetry majorly by many critics, and but there are lots of again rereadings, and many critics and many researchers establishes Milton's portrayal of Eve, okay, is feministic, or it is just sexist. It is not anti-feministic or pro-feministic, just sexist, because Milton, again, with his strong conviction in Puritan belief, has no other option than to follow the beliefs of his period, the Puritan belief. So he has to present Eve as somebody who is next to Adam. Okay, I won't say inferior, next to Adam. So he just reflects his period. Some of the researchers has found out or established. So what I want you to understand is a text can be read and reread again and again, and you can come out with different perceptions and based on how you read the text. So this is the conclusion we arrive at going through all the previous criticism done on particular text, whether it is Lady Macbeth or Paradise Lost, Eve, or whatever it may be. So I want just you to go through these verses. Okay, let us divide our labors. Eve says, so one critic or one researcher sees this as purely feministic, like Eve comes out with independence, she takes the initiative, she is not playing the role of subservient role to Adam. So she puts forward a proposition, so that shows her independent thinking, all those things, and her negotiation, like how are we happy still in fear of harm? When Adam says no to Eve, citing that there is danger lurking, there is a warning given to them, she is actually not convinced by Adam's arguments. She asks again, how are we happy still in fear of harm? So we cannot be happy if we have the fear. We are always in threat. If we are always in threat, we cannot be happy. So she argues like this. So this is seen differently by different critics. So what we have to understand is, going through the text and interpreting it on different criteria, we have our own freedom and we have our own scope for contribution, our own ideas. Okay, so safest and seamless by a husband stays. So some people see this as vulnerability of women, right? With this accent sweet renewed, actually Eve speaks to Adam. She wants to convince him, she wants to get permission for going out alone. So with accent sweet renewed. So when some people see it as sticky manipulativeness of Eve, others see it as the feminist. The people who want to establish Milton as a feminist sees that how Milton portrays Eve as the person who is skillful in negotiation, in the art of negotiation. Right? So how do we interpret depends on the way we see the text, based on language, based on other criteria, the history or the culture, or by the author, okay, in any of the, based on any of the criteria. So I have given the list of people, okay, very few, but if you just really search for the literature, you will get multiple readings of Milton with the various perceptions on his attitude towards women. So actually, Edward Lee Comte, he has brought out that he's just a sexist, merely a product of his time. And Sandra Gilbert, she has established like he is a misogynist, all right. And like Anne Ferry, she has established that he is a feminist and his portrayal of Eve is for progressive, right? So again, A Cup of Tea by Catherine Mansfield. Catherine Mansfield's this short story Cup of Tea, it gives lots of scope for feminist reading. Actually, two different characters. One is Rosemary Fell. Actually, she's an extraordinarily rich person, and there is another woman character, Miss Smith, very poor, belonging to the lower sections of the society, lower class, and without money even for a cup of tea. When she asks money for a cup of tea, this Rosemary Fell takes her to her home just for the sake of telling her friends that she helped a poor woman. So we can see the kind of class distinction implicitly given by the author. So you can here apply this feminist reading focusing on class distinction. It can be read in multiple levels like intersectional feminism or socialist or Marxist feminism, socialist feminism, that you can apply here. And you can also focus on the kind of language used by Catherine Mansfield for Rosemary as well as Miss Smith. And if you just have a quick glance of it, Madam stammered the voice, would you let me have the price of a cup of tea? A cup of tea. There was something simple, sincere in that voice. It wasn't in the least the voice of a beggar. Then have you no money at all? Asked Rosemary. None, madam, came the answer. How extraordinary. Rosemary peered through the dusk and the girl gazed back at her. How more than extraordinary. See, for Rosemary, she was not able to believe that a person would not even have a money for a cup of tea. So she was totally unaware of the kind of life lived by the poor people. So you can bring in here socialist feminism, you can bring in the language part of it while applying the feminist theory. And of course, the whole book gives you enough scope for applying feminism. So I want you to explore into it. And again, the last section, I want you to understand this myths and realities put forward again by Peter Barry. So we always think that as researchers, we always think that why these theories are so complex, full of profound ideas, unable to understand, it's confusing. I don't know what is structuralism. I don't know what is post-structuralism, deconstruction, all these words confusing me a lot. And we will be like, doubting our own intelligence and comprehension, whether we don't have the capacity to understand all those things and all. But actually, it is not so, right? So the collection of theories, okay, a dozen or so theories only we have, major theories we have, actually, they are very simple to understand, very easy to understand. Then what makes this very much challenging for us is not the theory, actually the language of the theory, the language in which it is written and about which it is written. That is what challenging us or confusing us, making it very difficult for us. So even for this language, why it is difficult, that there is a reason for this. See, most of the theorists are not literary people. Actually, they don't belong to literature. Like some of them are like even Freud, if you take up, he's a neurologist. And some of them are practicing psychoanalysts, philosophers, anthropologists. So they don't belong to literature as such. In fact, we should not even call it as literary theory. It's a self-contradictory. We have to call it as theory, right? And first reason is they are not people from literature. And second reason is many of the theorists are belonging to France, and many are written in French. And whatever we have now are English translations. So French language, actually, it's a Romance language which borrows generously from Latin. So the long Latinate words, when translated into English, okay, gives more difficulty in reading and understanding. So that is the reason. So what I would like all the researchers to understand is, so we have enough intelligence and comprehension to understand. What you need to do is some appropriate approach or strategies to be adopted. So what are these strategies? And considering the time constraint, I'm just having a quick glance over these. So follow this SQ3R technique. What is this SQ3R technique? First, S stands for survey. Okay, you take a book. Of course, as I told you, the theories are dauntingly plentiful. So lots of theories, lots of critics available. So take the major criticisms and major critical works. First survey, don't read it deeply, in depth and all, just survey and identify the key ideas. Okay, just scan it, identify the key ideas. All right, and take those key ideas alone and read intensely, focusing on that deeply, reading it, rereading it, and asking yourself, questioning it. And after some time, recalling and reviewing it. So you just work deep on a particular or the key tenets alone, and be a slow as well as an active reader. Active reader meaning that making notes, outlining, underlining, all those things you do it. And most importantly, the mistake we do is actually we read various commentators and then you get this, he says this, he says that, and we will follow all those things superficially. Okay, so better this can be avoided. Instead, have a detailed knowledge of a well-known argument. For example, take the Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, or Julia Kristeva's book, okay, her theory on semiotics and symbolic. Just take key concepts, key arguments, and have a detailed knowledge of it. So this will help you understand better and give you more clarity. So make your reading meditative, reflective, and personal. Okay. So the thing is, how do you interpret? How do you see? How do you perceive? What is your takeaway on reading these theories? Make a note of. And then you just develop and build up on that. And above all, be confident about your understanding, about your intelligence. So all of us can read and understand and interpret. Okay, actually, Peter Barry says that all these theories are simple for understanding. So there are no profound ideas, only the language is challenging. All right. So I would like to conclude my deliberation with the morale booster statement, morale booster for all the researchers, that what makes these theories interesting is not their magisterial certainty and consistency. So there is no full stop or the final verdict for any kind of text. As we had seen, like Milton, of course, he is an anti-feminist. He is a masculinist. Nobody can conclude and put a full stop. All right. So there is no magisterial certainty and consistency. The theories with their blind spots, the corners they cut, the blurry edges, and the constant and often conflicting reformulations. All right. So these are the things which make them interesting, and these are the things which gives us courage, which gives their scope, gives us scope for reading and rereading and revisiting whatever which have been visited so far. All right. So the theories always, they have their blind spots. They have blurry edges. You cannot do away with one theory and do the other. For example, you cannot do away with Marxism and read feminism. You cannot do away with any other culture or history or a philosophy or anything else and then do feminism in isolation. So they have blurry edges. So this gives us scope for reading and rereading. And one thing you have to be confirmed and confident that even if you arrive at incomplete ideas or crude ideas, don't lack confidence, don't have any sort of complex. Even if your idea is very minuscule in its size or in its amount or in its quality, it is your own and original rather than the echo of somebody. So please be confident and don't give up. Ultimately, we should use theories and theories should not use us. All right. So with this, with all the best wishes to all the researchers, I would like to extend my thanks to everyone. Thank you for your patient listening. And I would be happy to answer queries if you have any. Thank you very much.
Yes. Participants, I'm opening the chat box. Please, if you have any questions, please type them the chat box.
And 1 minute, these are the
Yes, ma'am.
references. I would suggest and strongly recommend the Peter Barry's book, Beginning Theory and Introduction to Literary and Cultural Theory, for your basic understanding of all kinds of literary theories. It is a wonderful book, very precisely written with all the applications and approaches also, with sample example applications also. And we have a long list of, Peter Barry has given a long list of references which will be more useful for all the researchers using all kinds of theories. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Participants, I have opened the chat box. Please, if you have, you can either raise your hands or you can post your questions in the chat box. Any questions? Will you tell some subaltern theories based on old-aged people?
Subaltern theories based on old-aged people.
Yes, ma'am. That was what Jayaswati had asked.
Yes, of course. Old-aged people, actually, again, subaltern theory, it's an umbrella term which includes marginalized sections of different categories, and each category will have their unique problems and characteristics. And what kind of old-aged people you are looking at? I don't know the background. If you could tell me, I would be more helpful.
Jayaswati, are you there? Could you tell us what type of old age people? Ma'am, another question is, in what way feminist theory is related to deconstruction and Marxism?
So as we had seen, I have given some examples of the role of theory, language, and psychoanalysis. And again, Marxism. See, feminism cannot be studied in isolation. And whenever that is, women characters face issues related to capitalism, especially Marxism focuses on the challenges due to capitalism. And as more and more women now start working in and facing lots of discrimination and lots of inequalities in their working condition, the work environment, and even the salary given to men and women are not always equal. Especially this disparity is more prominent in the lower echelons of the society, okay, if not in the higher echelons. So when you see problems related to all this, you can of course apply Marxism. And similarly, deconstruction also, depending on the language used. Okay, so deconstruction majorly talks about the language and everything. So depending, so the text is revealed through the language in which it is used. So it depends on the researcher to take up the lens, which lens or which part of the text or which aspect of the text gives you scope for applying what kind of theory. So it is decided by the text. It is decided by the features used in the text. All right. So when the researcher takes up the text, you just ask those questions listed. So what is the scope provided by the text for studying or applying what kind of theory? Okay, so I would say that the application of theory, what kind of theory, is decided by the text. Decided by the text. Hope I have answered your question.
Yes, no. I think Jaiswati has given like the old age people who are subalterned in their own houses, like in Rohinton mystery novel Family Matters. I think she has given that. And there's another. Yes, ma'am.
It's quite interesting, actually. Subalterns, so we have a new kind of subalterns emerging in today's context. And there are very few theories focusing specifically on old-aged people. I don't think so. Like whether any specific theory focuses on old-age people alone. Generally, you can make use of the subaltern theory to study with additions, with your inputs, with your concepts, with your contributions. Okay, specific to old age people in what context? Again, Indian context or a Western context, and that too, what are the other intersectionality you can apply here? Okay, whether the poor people or rich people, here money also plays a major role. All right. So you can apply here intersectional study of intersectionality here.
Okay, ma'am. The next question is: feminism still vibrant even after the advancement of digital growth? And what sort of feminist themes are portrayed by Indian writers?
Feminism, of course, we have gone beyond just feminism, and we have our gender studies and queer theory and all those things. And as you rightly said, that it has taken its next level, I would say, with digital media, but still the women-centric problems, as we have seen in the fourth wave feminism, even though now it has taken its place in the digital media, again, we bring it under feminism only. But of course, many people actually consider this as a thing which has lost its meaning or derogatory even. People, in fact, they start their conversations like this with a caveat. They will, don't think I'm a feminist, but I think they will talk like this. So even though slowly it is losing because of over usage of it, but still it is, I think it is relevant as long as women are like discriminated based on their sex.
And good evening, ma'am. Can you tell some context which highlights the real empowerment of women?
Some context which highlight the real empowerment of women. Actually, in many of the I would like to give the examples of Dalit women writers here. And in most of the Dalit life writings and all, you can see the success stories, how people have started in an oppressed or marginalized scenario, and because of their education and employment, how they were able to come over or get rid of all those challenges, and their success stories. After becoming successful, only they start writing their life writings, right? So I would definitely give example of these Dalit women writers. For example, even Bama and Urmila Pawar, if you take, even the prisons we broke, actually, they were like prisoners, but they broke the prisons, right? Baby Kamble would have written. So I think these are all the examples for women empowerment. They have the voice now. They have found their voice. So for they having voiceless, so they have found their voice.
Okay, ma'am. And what is the difference between feminist theory and women's studies?
Yes, again, not much difference. As I told you, like not all women are feminist. Am I right? So I want you to understand that not all women are feminist, and not all feminists are even women. So even a man can write about women's problems and vice versa. So feminists actually, they essentially protest against the unequal conditions, how they have to be treated equally. And women's studies, I would say, apart from this, all other concerns of women. Okay, it is not just inequality, it is not just asserting their rights. Apart from that, so it is inclusive of everything. So it's a broader term. Women's studies is a broader term than the feminist theory.
Okay, ma'am. I think, okay, participants will go with this with the last question. Can you state any feminist theorist in India, ma'am?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I didn't focus much on Indian feminism, like the Black women and white women, okay, how they are discriminated by means of race. Even in the Indian concept, we have the higher caste women and then lower caste women. So here caste plays a major role. And Indian feminists, like white women, they don't even know about the challenges faced by Dalit women. So because of all these comes a kind of feminism called Dalit feminism. And we have Sharmila Reddy, the feminist who wrote on Dalits. Okay, and we have many feminists who fight for equal rights. Okay, so I would give the example of Sharmila Reddy, one of the pioneers in writing about feminism, Dalit feminism in particular.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yes, Rahul, can you do the honors, Rahul? Yes.
Yeah. So it was my delight and to listen to such a thoughtful presentation, ma'am. So thanks for that. So looking at the topic, literary theories with regard to feminism, looking at the topic, I could understand it was a very complex one altogether. So, but ma'am, I need to first acknowledge that you did great justice to it in the given short stipulated time. It was just about 90 minutes, if I'm right. So it did a great justice to that, ma'am. So thanks for that. And ma'am, throughout your presentation, there are certain things that I observed. I mean, that I just wanted to share out of my observation. Ma'am, I could see there is a great kind of sound planning that happened right from the beginning. The way you started with talking about the content, so that could give a clear picture about where this entire 90 minutes is going to head towards, and what is that entire purpose and objective is going to. So that gave a clear picture about how it's going to happen. And throughout your presentation, that I could see that the idea of role of literature in expressing the feminism is being quite emphasizing then and there. And to be specific, ma'am, I really liked the axiom that you shared it right now with us, that all feminists are not women and all women are not feminists. So, so that actually, though it's an axiom that has a great in-depth knowledge into it. So the same way your presentation gave us a lot of insight into the topic, where you just spoke to us about terminologies like about about the female, the feminine, and the feminist, and you spoke to us in detail about the perspectives of social, cultural, economic, and political aspects, and then you introduced us into the four waves of feminism, and you even shared with us about the purpose of liberal feminism, the radical feminism, cultural, and intersectional feminism. So thanks for that, ma'am. And I really liked the way how it was presented about the entire, the feminist criticisms about the difference and the disagreement that it shared about. It's about the amount and the types of the rules, the theories. It's about the Anglo-American theory, the British, and the French. And most importantly, I have to thank you for the beautiful references that you quoted upon, especially with the two pioneers in English literature, if I'm right, about Milton and Shakespeare, because they created two immortal characters. One is about Lady Macbeth, and the other one was about Abe. So whenever we talk about feminism, I don't think we can just disregard these two characters. So thanks for hinting on those things and explaining through the eyes of these two characters, and even talking to us about the best strategy that could be followed about SQ3R. It's about, so you told us very clearly that whenever we take a text, the best way to approach is to survey and question the text and read it and recall and review. And that is always the best strategy that could be ever followed from. And as the saying goes, all that begins well ends well. As you started with the sound planning, ma'am, the ending you gave every one of us a good motivational touch. So that was quite inspiring and encouraging and motivating all the aspiring research scholars over here. So to end with, ma'am, thanks a lot for joining us in your busy schedule and engaging us throughout this 90 minutes with all your thoughtful ideas into the topic and great insight into the topic. So thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir, for your detailed feedback, and I'm really honored, and it's my pleasure. I had a nice time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aruna. Thank you so
Have
much.
you back with us on many more platforms, ma'am. Hoping to get you back with us.
Thank
Sure,
you so
ma'am.
much, Aruna. Thank you all. Thank you all the participants. Thank you so much.
Yes. Dear participants, I'll be posting the feedback link now. As I have already said, the feedback link will be open for the next 1 hour. So after that, it will be closed down. And I hope tomorrow, all of you have reminded that tomorrow is the last date for submission of your written assignment, which has already been posted on your Google Classroom. Thank you. Yes, I'm posting the link on your chat box, the feedback link. Okay, I think Anita, you asked, there's only one assignment which is being posted, a common assignment, which you will have to complete it and upload it by Friday. So that is one of the criteria for receiving the certificates, Anita. I hope you have accepted the invite on the Google Classroom, Anita. Yes, thank you. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, participants. Have a great evening. Tomorrow we'll be having our last and final day session. Hoping to meet you soon tomorrow at 6:30.
Thank you, Aruna. I take leave.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Feedback link. Yeah, I posted the feedback link once again. Yes. It's 1,000 word. It's 1,000 word, approximately 1,000 words. It has to be in the typed format. It has to be approximately 1,000 words. It has to be in the typed format. It has to be with size 12, MS Word document, size 12 with Times New Roman. And the assignment topic also goes by interpret a literary work of your choice by applying a literary theory familiar to you. So it's been already posted in Classroom. So I have classroom. Yeah, 1 minute. If you're there already in the WhatsApp group, if you're there already in the WhatsApp group, the classroom link has been posted.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Yes, as soon as the resource person shares the PPT, if ma'am is agreeing to that, I'll definitely post it on the WhatsApp group. If the resource person allows, definitely go ahead. But otherwise, topics or materials related to feminism has already been posted in classroom. Sadiq sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Sadiq sir, so it's over for today. I have posted the feedback link, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. So we'll wait for 1 minute and close, or are we going to close there right now?
So which one, sir? The feedback link, sir?
When are we going to close this meeting, ma'am?
No, this I will close it now, sir. I close this now.
Okay, because
Sadiq sir, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Rahul,
you,
sir,
Very good
thank you
evening.
very much.
Sorry to disturb you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
please,
Thank
please.
you.
Yes.
Dear ma'am, very good evening. Sorry to disturb you.
Yes,
I
tell
just
me.
wanted to know, you people have stated that it is wide margin, whether it is 1 inch or 1.5 inch. Because when we do research, probably we used to have on the right side 1.5 inches and rest 1 inch. So I just wanted to have a clarification on that.
Sadiq sir, could you?
1 inch, ma'am. 1 inch.
1 inch.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Sadiq sir. Thank you, participants.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Bye.